Hey everyone, it's week 3 and I'm back with my first video in the exercise series. Now on Friday I went for the longest run that I've done in the past 3 weeks. I've done 8k, so my distance is slowly and gradually increasing. Now as well as running, I've also been going to the gym, and as you can tell from the title, what I'm going to be talking about is aerobic and anaerobic exercise, what the differences are between them and why you need to do both. So what's the difference between the two? Well, aerobic exercise we tend to think of as things like cycling, swimming and running, but actually even if we just take running as an example, you can do that aerobically and anaerobically. Now aerobic exercise is where you've got enough oxygen coming into your body so that it can be used up by the muscles as a continuous source of energy. So to understand how our muscles work when they're contracting and how they burn energy, we need to look at some of the chemistry that's going on in there. Now, our muscles use something called ATP in order to contract when we're exercising. Now, our muscles will go through 3 different processes to be able to get energy from the fuel sources that we've got stored in our muscles. Now, our bodies at first will start to use some of the glucose stores that we've got in our muscles. It converts that to ATP and also leaves some byproducts as well. Now, it does this whole process without using oxygen, so it is anaerobic. Now, once that glucose is depleted, our body starts to look for alternative fuel sources, and this is where it requires a steady flow of oxygen to be able to use the byproducts from burning the glucose to get more ATP out of those byproducts. So our muscles continue to work harder and harder and start burning off all the oxygen and the waste products that we've got from the first stage of metabolism to generate more energy source via ATP. Now we get to a point where we don't have enough oxygen if we're working that hard to continue that process, which means those 2 aerobic processes stop and we go back to burning glucose. Now the important part to remember here is that when we were also doing aerobic exercise, we were able to use the waste products from burning glucose and use those as an alternative energy source. But without doing that, we get these waste products that build up, and that gets converted to lactic acid, which, if you've heard of that before, it basically gets stored in your muscles, and that's when we start to feel fatigued and you start to feel sore muscles. Now, if you'd like to go into that process in more detail, there's a great video which I've linked below by Dorian. So bringing all that knowledge back into the training program, there are 3 things that I'm doing at the moment. The first is the obvious one, which is long distance running. That's an aerobic process, and it means that I'm improving my cardiovascular health and also increasing my endurance to be able to run longer and longer distances. Now the second is anaerobic intervals, where I'm running at high speed, resting and just repeating that process over and over again. Now the third exercise is lifting weights at the gym, and the purpose of this is to increase muscle mass so that you can store more energy sources in those muscles, and also when you're doing aerobic exercise you can absorb more of the oxygen that you're breathing in, which means you increase your endurance. So by doing all 3 of those exercises, it puts you in a good position to improve your running ability. So that's it for me this week. Next weekend I'll be bringing you my first video on sleep, rest and recuperation. Have a great week and I'll speak to you soon.